All right, thank you for staying with us. The Nigerian Senate has passed 4 key tax reform bills proposed by President Bola Tinubu, marking a significant step towards modernizing the country's tax system. This development is expected to boost national revenues, promote fairness in tax administration, and accelerate development. The bills passed include the Nigeria Tax Bill 2024, Joint Revenue Board Establishment Bill, Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Bill, and Tax Administration Bill. However, the Senate rejected a proposal to increase the value-added tax, that's the VAT, from 7.5% to 10%, opting to retain the current rate. Instead, the Senate introduced a 4% development levy to sustain funding for critical government agencies. Well, joining us for this conversation is the CEO of Finance with Muktar, Mohammed. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you join us.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Great. Now, let's begin with how these reforms will transform and modernize our tax system in Nigeria, especially also government revenue, seeing that we have retained the value-added tax at 7.5%.
Well, it's a good tax policy. For me, our tax law has been very obsolete. This is the first time we're having a modernized tax return, tax law, like I would say. And I think I've said it over and over. I think this is the best economic policy I've seen of this administration thus far in terms of economy and looking at taxes. We know we have challenges with multiple taxation. This would definitely address that challenges of multiple taxation. For me, that's the biggest thing. Before the last count, we have some state government having about the federal government 16 levies. State government have about 25 levies that businesses pay. Local government also has 21 levies that businesses pay. When you put the total, you have about 61 levies that businesses are always taxed, what they call it tax. And no economy grows by levies. Every economy must grow by tax. Any economy that is growing, because levies cannot be substantiated, it gives room for corruption. So, but when you talk about taxes is what really comes to the government and aid development. If you look at a state like Lagos, again, if you look at non-tax actors, how much they make in terms of law levies that they charge, it's running to about 210 billion. And that is almost like 4% of the GDP of Lagos State. So that also tells you what was in some states. It's so funny that you have tax like wheelbarrow tax, bicycle tax. There was a time that they used to have television tax, TV tax. It's so oscillate. When you look at that, then one other game changer in this tax policy that I really like is the fact that if you earn less than less than 1 million yearly, you won't be paying taxes again. And that for me is very good, especially for the low income earners. For businesses, if you say about 50 million in terms of turnover, you also won't be paying taxes again. That for me is also a game changer. But there's a clash there because again, that's normally driven by the informal sector. And you know that the informal sectors, government has not been able to come up with a blueprint on how to tax that informal sector and get off these levies and bring them to the state government or the federal government. For me, that's what I thought this tax will address. But unfortunately, I don't think it's been able to address that informal sector. But and you know, Nigeria is a largely informal sector-driven economy, and that is why most of the local government, the states, comes up with levies because they know that that's the only way you can get the informal sector to pay. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I like the idea of that the Federal Inland Revenue now is now Federal Revenue Services. Fantastic. That means government can have their tax instead of Nigerian custom collecting NEMASA. So you have it in one pool, and now what do I call it? The commission that goes to them, Federal Inland Revenue, have been reduced from 4% to 2%. So that also is fantastic. So they've done a lot, and again we have a challenge again of the tax to GDP. If you look at personal income tax globally, it's about 30%. But when you look at Nigeria, we are doing barely 10%, and when you come to Africa, we are doing 10.8, and while averagely African is doing about 18.5. That shows that we are really behind. despite being one of the largest economies in Africa.
So the informal sector that you mentioned is something that I want you to, expatiate further on, because according to the NBS data, they said that over 80% of Nigerian workers, are in the informal economy, and it is also their duty to pay their tax, apart from, some of the levies that they get to pay. And some of these people will still tell you that, what exactly is in it for me? When I pay tax, I don't get to see good roads, I don't get to see, quality healthcare and all of that. So one thing is for you to convince them, another thing is for you to also get them to pay their taxes. Among all of them, we still have the tax evasion, the evaders, who there are still so many people who are not paying tax that are not, covered in the tax net. So how should we, this ongoing reform, capture, because we need to capture them if we want better development. So what exactly do you think they should look at before they release this document out there for implementation? I
think for me, the NBS shouldn't be saying that, oh, when I'm paying so much levies, then you are telling me to come pay taxes. Like I told you, some states, some market women, this informal sector, pay as high as 15 levies, different type of levies. And then you are putting so much burden on those businesses, and that's why sometimes you see that businesses in the informal sector are not thriving. A lot of them have gone out of business because you can be putting so. And sometimes these levies come with a lot of threatening, a lot of. That's right.
So some get down to fighting.
So it doesn't. It's not good. So now, I think what the Senate has done is to see that it's a critical infrastructure. Hopefully, those critical infrastructure will be to address these informal sector gaps, hopefully. Because like you say, rightly pointed, if you go to them, they tell you, look, I pay levies. And even with the levies, I don't even see commensurate development to my levies. And my levies just go into private pockets. If I pay taxes, where is the road? So I think this is a problem that has to deal with trust. So there was a time in Lagos that I think during the first time of Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, where the tax net was widening in Lagos State, and when they do any construction, they say taxpayers' money that work. They put a signpost. So to say, oh, it's your tax money.
As you see in Sukuk too, like
it's your tax money that is working. So that encouraged a lot of people to say, oh, so it's tax money that we used to do. So the local government and others also, they are doing a lot of work these days because their revenue has improved. They should also let people look this road that we are controlling, because if you look at the informal sector would largely feel impact of this tax through the local government. So they need to improve. Their intake has improved, so they need to improve in terms of the. So that will help this. But what you see in the local government is that the local government are more interested in levies than taxes. So that is an area they need to address. Eviter of taxes, unfortunately, I think it's more or less like the political class and the rich that have a way of invading taxes. Because when you look, sometimes you look at ministerial screaming and you hear what taxes they've paid, and you begin to ask yourself, so what have you been doing all this while? Especially you say politicians say they don't pay taxes because they don't have a normal job. So when it's time for them to go for ministerial screening, they just go to the tax office to get 3 years tax return. I think that should be addressed. And again, that bill also tried to address that, because it's not saying the rich will pay more taxes than the poor.
That's right.
But again, that has a challenge, because again, that could also be passed down back to the poor. So the challenge there also is that most of the rich also are providing security for themselves. So if you want to say you want them to pay more, then you have to do more in terms of security. So for me, tax invaders is an easy thing to address, as long as you know those that are invading tax, you know how to get to them. So they are the ones. But for the informal sector, you need to bring critical infrastructure to them. Then for the formal sector, the low-income earner, this is a game changer.
Interesting. I want you to touch on this matter of 4% levy, because for critical development or critical infrastructure, whichever way we want to define it, I'm thinking that statement is vague and should be, specified so as to insulate it from corruption that you mentioned earlier on. But as it is, isn't it leaving room for corruption at the end of the day?
You hit it. That's why I said no economy grew through levies. No economy in the world will grow through levies. You don't just keep doing levies. It won't work. So they need to also come up with that. They need to, what is the critical infrastructure? But that's government language, that's the political class language. Oh, we're doing critical infrastructure, we're talking healthcare, we're talking education, we are talking roads. Those are always the language they use. So those language has to change to specifics. What are critical infrastructure? We need to know whether critical infrastructure is power. Remember that government is off power. So why are you getting yourself involved in power? So we need to know what really is critical infrastructure. You see, I heard someone say, oh, this law will also take care of taxes, value-added taxes in the healthcare. Fantastic, because again, cost of medicals, drugs has gone up because most of the pharmaceutical companies that used to manufacture in Nigeria are not there. Fantastic. Food item will no more pay VAT on food item. You know that that's also serious for Nigeria. That's also a good thing. Rent again, but again, how many people really pay VAT in rent? So I don't want to calculate that. Education, I don't think they pay any value-added tax on education, school fees and all that. So those are, but for me, the two critical area in terms of value-added tax removed from healthcare and removed from food items. So what that will do is that if I go to a supermarket, if I go to an eatery to eat, I shouldn't be paying value-added tax or buying food in an eatery. But again, that is a challenge, because when you talk about value-added tax, you know that is a case that has been kept in the limbo because of the political solution they are looking for. Value-added tax ordinarily should go to the state government, because they are the one adding those value to those taxes.
Interesting. We'll come back to continue this conversation when we return from the break. We're looking at the reforms of our tax and that has been moved on or addressed recently by the Senate, and we still have our guest in the studio, Muktar Mohammed, CEO of Finance with Muktar, speaking with us on this. And like we were talking behind the camera, we're talking about the aspect of the gradual reduction in statutory funding of agencies such as Tertiary Education Trust Fund, as the TET Fund, National Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA. Now, when you talk about these two agencies, TET Fund, for instance, you know, when you look at our tertiary institution, they are funded for that development of our tertiary institution. And then for NITDA, for instance, we know that it is central to Nigeria's digital transformation, supporting ICT growth. And when you talk about digital economy, that is where they come in. When we are talking about the gradual reduction of funding or statutory funding for these agencies, what do you make of it, especially for our education sector, where we have been seeing some persons complaining about the rot, and then digital infrastructure, how it is that we haven't advanced as other countries have?
I think it's going to be a big challenge to those two agencies of government. But again, you have to ask yourself the contribution in terms of the GDP to these two agencies have been able to make to government. But like you pointed out, the challenge will be that most of the costs that some of these funds used to have, now it will be reduced, and so those burden also might be passed to the student in a tertiary institution. But government will tell you that we are addressing that already with student loan scheme. So that's why they are reducing that.
But that's not addressing the infrastructure.
You see, when it comes to infrastructure, I think what you are beginning to see is that government is beginning to say, look, tertiary institution, good for the PPP, private partners, PPP, because what you see in most private institutions are private libraries. I mean, private hostels in most government institutions. So it's becoming a PPP thing. And so again, how much people will be able to afford those accommodation? But the government will tell you that that's why we have NEFON now. They take care of the loan for students. Yes. So I think that they will tell you, that is the excuse they will give to you. But like I said, that body will be passed to the students. And like we say, education is supposed to be a social investment. So if you are saying critical investment and you are looking at having more funds into critical investment, like I say, healthcare, education are part of the critical investment. So maybe what we'll see now, maybe part of those 4% might be going to those critical environment directly from the tax, whereby you see hostels are built and say taxpayers' money working. So maybe for the digital, I think that for me is one of those things that we needed to even improve funding They even create special funding because the global economy has gone digital. We are thinking of being one of the best digital players. If you look at, especially that also addressed the Nigerian youth, that has been the space that will end up a lot of great review globally. So I think it's a space that we should, in terms of improving more funding and getting more companies in. Now, that can be addressed. It depends on what government wants to do. Because government can decide that, look, we are opening up that place, we are bringing in global players, and we are going to give them a tax rebate. So that could also be a game changer. Rather than we putting in more money, we bring in good players. Once you come to that sector, that digital sector, because we are no more funding it as usual, some of those companies that used to enjoy those policies, we give them tax rebate, come into Nigeria, create more jobs, and maybe that is what government should do in that area. Because I totally agree with you that it's going to be a burden, but there are ways out, like the tertiary decision, PPP helped it, the student loan scheme helped it, the digital space, get big players into this space and also give them tax bracket. Look, tax has gone beyond revenue.
Right.
Globally, you don't look tax to be just about the revenue. Tax itself now is a means of growing your economy, bringing in players, giving them tax holidays. Only in Nigeria that tax holidays are abused, but tax holidays normally depend on how much in terms of job creation you are bringing to the table. So for me, I think that could be addressed.
That's right. So in all of this, we are looking at more monies for all the levels of the government, federal government, states. Now, if you look at what the Senate has actually okayed, giving 55% to states, while federal government takes 10%, and then local government takes 35%. So beyond the almost times three of allocation, federal allocation that states receive, it goes to show that there's so much that they're now having in their coffers to engender development across the subnationals. Now, how do we demand accountability from them? Because yes, they can't tell us they don't have money any longer. They can't tell us they don't make more money from the federal government and directly from them. What are the things that we need to do as Nigerians beyond as watchdogs? What should we do to demand accountabilities from these subnationals, nay, the governors?
I think the challenge is most Nigerians, we just think of the center. So it will take a lot of education for them to remember secondary education, primary educations. It's all local government, state government. But when you see decay in those sectors, all we cried was federal government. That's why federal government had to create federal government colleges. You understand? So those are supposed to be the role of the federal government. But when you talk about education, people don't forget about the state, forget about the local government. Why I said, for me, I'm not going to be so excited about it because, like you said, since President Tinubu came to power, the state government have had increased revenue. We are not seeing those impact. Now, remember that they came to this junction as a regard of negotiation because there was the value-added tax that also would have depended on what you are able to add that would give you more revenue. But that they found a political solution to that. For me, that is what have diluted this tax law. Because what I wanted to see is that value-added tax depends on what the people are able to consume. So if you don't empower your people will not be able to consume.
So you're saying 7.5% is too paltry, it's too small?
No. Initially it's going to be the states. The state that has more companies that get more from the value-added tax. But they said no, especially the 19 other state governments saying, no, we won't agree that. And I understand their own because, again, you were removing the value-added tax on agriculture, and that happens to be their own main product. But I think that is gone, and they've been able to find a political solution to it. I think I agree with the Senate reducing that, leaving it at 7.5 at the moment because
it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. Not that it's not sustainable, but that's creating more hardship for the people. Because
so it could have been lower.
It could have, but you remember where we were before we came to 7.5, and so I think for me 7.5 is relatively fair balance. It could get once the economy improves. No tax value-added tax is left at a single point for a long time. It's supposed to be updated as things get better. Now that is that. But I think for the state government. And for the people, they need to create accountability. And when the state government releases budgets, people don't even look at what are they planning to do. Local government also have budgets.
That's right.
Their local government chairman also present budget. Now the local government revenue will not be going to the states directly. We're going directly to the local government. How much accountability are we going to call from them? I think it's better on education, of Nigerians, especially the grassroots education. But you and I know that the challenge with the grassroots is that it infused in a lot of political gimmies, political. So nobody tends to look at. Everybody just tends to look at the political side of it. Who is our local government chairman? Who is our councillor?
And
so everybody just
Lagos State just conducted local government chairman chairmanship.
Yes,
nobody's even talking about.
Nobody's talking about that. Should be the most critical election. Right. Everybody just go chairman, oh councillor, oh they queue in front of the chairman, the councillor has, he gives them whatever palliative, and they are gone. Nobody thinks of. So I think it boiled down to that mentality that came from the military regime. It has not changed, whereby the center is what everybody felt has been so powerful. The center is just receiving just 10%. And if you look at what the center have been able to do, not holding forth for them, in terms of the allocation that have come to them, it's more impressive than what you see the local government and the state government. So especially the state government. The state government will not tell you that 9% of the state government are not saying that what we used to earn before because of our added in terms of paying of minimum wage has gone up. So we don't, the criteria doesn't have anything to do with developmental projects.
So are we right now? So we should see that most of them will be able to pay the 70,000 naira for in terms of the minimum wage that we've been talking about. That's what we're perhaps looking at, and then
hopefully that shouldn't have been a problem because of the kind of allocation they have, and also need to see when it comes to leadership. Leadership also must be truthful. Leadership also must think of the people. Leadership also must be accountable. Now, when you look at the leadership, what they try to point to the people is they don't tend to come down on their own excesses, but they want the people to come down on their own, and the people are watching you. There's no state governor, based on the allocation that they have been getting since President Tinubu comes to power, that should come out confidently and say we cannot pay 70,000 minimum wage. Some of them say so. Yeah, because they are doing white elephant projects. Some of them are building airports where planes will not land. So how do you expect that when you are doing projects that are not economical benefit to your people? Now you say an increment, but again, look at the appointees. A state governor, I think state government have about 200 special assistants, and came out to tell us, oh, I'm not going to pay all of them, but you are going to fund, you are going to fuel the cars that they will use. You are going to give them cars. Trips, and they are going to go on foreign trips sometime. So I think it's all about accountability and responsibility. Most state governments should begin to think of accountability and responsibility. You were put there by the people. You are there to serve the people, not to serve your political interests. That's right.
I like that aspect. That I hope that the majority of them would have that in mind, that they are to serve the people, not their personal interest. Okay. I believe that our time is up already. We must thank you, Muktar Mohammed, CEO Finance of Muktar, for your time on the program. So much has been said. There's much more to be said, but we believe we'll leave it here now. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we will now link up with Eshomomu Imodu for the conversation around the impact of recent mass defections from opposition parties and what the significant shift means ahead of the 2027 election. But that will be after the break. Stay with us.